"You always look at me through the window," she said with a half-smile that tried to pass for a joke, but came out a little brittle around the edges. I didn't answer right away. There was something in her tone, not accusing, not quite playful either, like she was testing the water, not sure how deep it went. I said the truth, in the only way I knew how. "Because you always appear." She stood there, arms folded across a sweater too big for her frame, standing just inside the threshold of her apartment, across from mine. Our windows faced each other. For months, I'd seen her silhouette pass behind thin curtains, light a candle, pause by the glass, disappear again. I never stared. I just noticed. That evening, she opened her window wide, as if to clear the air inside. I was drinking coffee on my couch, the way I did when the day needed rinsing off. She must have seen me sitting quietly, not looking away when our eyes met. And for the first time, she spoke. Her name was Julia. I knew that already, from the mailbox downstairs. Mine said Henry. We'd nodded at each other in the elevator twice, maybe 3 times. She always looked like she was about to say something, then thought better of it. I never pushed. People speak when they're ready. Some never are. There was something fragile in her that night, not weak, not broken, but thin like glass cooled too fast. She leaned on the frame of her window, pulling her sleeves over her hands like she wanted to disappear just enough to feel safe. "Do you ever get tired of being alone?" she asked. I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Sometimes," I said, "but I think I've grown good at it." She nodded. "Me too. I used to hate it. Now I just expect it." I could have told her then that it doesn't have to be that way, that being alone isn't the same as being forgotten, but it would have sounded too heavy, too soon. So I said nothing. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It felt like something shared, like we both recognized the shape of it, even if we'd arrived there from different directions. She said she was heating soup, but it tasted like metal, and she didn't feel like finishing it. I offered coffee. She declined but smiled, a little less forced than before. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. "I don't usually talk like this." "Like what?" "Like I'm hoping someone's listening." I didn't say I was. She could see it. The window stayed open a while longer. She didn't say much after that, just looked out into the night, then back at me like maybe the silence had said enough. I finished my coffee. She pulled her sleeves back down, waved once, then closed the glass slowly, leaving only a faint reflection behind. I didn't move. I watched the light in her apartment dim to a soft glow. Something about it made the room feel warmer, even from across the space. And though she disappeared from view, I knew I'd be watching that window differently from now on. The next time we spoke, it wasn't through the window. It was her knocking, soft, like she wasn't sure she wanted to be heard. I opened the door and found her standing there in socks and a cardigan, holding a flashlight with weak batteries and an apology in her eyes. "The power went out. Sorry, I didn't know who else to ask." I nodded and stepped aside. No questions, no hesitation. She walked in slowly, not like someone entering a stranger's apartment, but like someone remembering something familiar. She looked around as if trying to place me in the space. I let her. The room was dim, lit by a small emergency lamp I kept on the bookshelf. I offered her tea. She accepted, almost surprised at herself. While the kettle warmed, she sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly between her knees. "I used to live with someone," she said, not looking at me. "You get used to little things, like who checks the fuse box or who pretends not to mind the dark." I didn't ask where he was now. That kind of absence has a weight you can feel in the way people sit. She continued without prompting. It ended quietly. No fights, no broken things, just a kind of forgetting, like we stopped seeing each other in the same room. I poured the tea and handed her a mug. She took it with both hands, like it was something more than just warm water and leaves. "I think I miss being seen," she said. I knew that feeling, not the kind that craves attention, but the ache of being in a room and still invisible. The sense that your thoughts echo too quietly to be caught by anyone else. "You're not hard to see," I said. She looked up, not with gratitude, but curiosity, like she was trying to understand if I meant it. I did. We didn't talk about anything important after that. She asked what I did for work. I told her about the small publishing house where I edited manuscripts most people would never read. She smiled and said that suited me. She talked about her move here, how she thought changing cities would shift something inside her, but mostly it just made the quiet louder. I told her I understood. She believed me. The tea cooled slowly between us. She drank most of hers. I refilled her cup without asking. She let me. Eventually, the lights flickered back on. Her eyes narrowed as they adjusted, and she blinked like someone waking from a soft dream. She stood, a little too quickly, and apologized again for intruding. "You didn't," I said. At the door, she hesitated. "Thanks, Henry." I just nodded. She crossed the hall with slower steps than before, paused outside her door, and looked back once. Not a long look, not a question in it, just acknowledgement that we'd shared something, not loud, not dramatic, but real. When I closed the door behind her, the room felt the same, and also entirely different. After that night, something shifted, not in any grand declarative way, but in the way she started saying good morning when we passed each other by the mailboxes. Sometimes, when I opened my window to let in the late afternoon air, hers was already open. We didn't always talk, but the presence was there, a quiet understanding growing slowly like moss on stone. We began crossing paths more often. At first, it seemed like coincidence. Then it didn't. She'd time her exit for groceries a few minutes after I left, or I'd see her stepping into the elevator just as I returned from work. Neither of us mentioned it, but the patterns became familiar, comforting even. She didn't try to fill every silence. That was something I noticed early. People often talk to avoid being alone with their thoughts. Julia wasn't like that. She let moments breathe. She let me breathe. And in that stillness, I started to look forward to those unspoken pauses as much as the words that sometimes followed them. One evening, we stood by the front steps of the building, watching the rain come down in sheets. Neither of us had umbrellas, but neither of us seemed in a rush to leave either. "I like this kind of rain," she said. "The kind that keeps people inside, makes the world feel smaller." I agreed. There was something about shared stillness under a shared sky that made the silence feel less empty. "I used to hate waiting for things," she added. "Now I find myself hoping things take longer, like I'm afraid of arriving too fast." I didn't ask what she was hoping for. Some answers unfold better in time. I told her that I often let my coffee cool just so I can sit with it longer. She smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because it matched something in her, some rhythm we both knew. Sometimes we didn't speak at all, like the time she sat across from me on the bench outside the building, reading a book, and I just sat beside her, watching the street go quiet. When she turned a page, I glanced, but never asked what it was. I didn't need to know. The moment was complete as it was. And then there were the little things, the subtle, easily missed ones. She began leaving her window cracked open longer at night. I noticed because I kept doing the same. We never waved again, but we lingered. That became our language. There was one night she left a candle burning on her windowsill. I watched its flicker until it went out on its own, and somehow that felt like a conversation too. It would be easy to say we were becoming friends, but it wasn't that simple. Friendship has definitions. This had only presence, mutual witnessing, a slow recognition of someone else's gravity without stepping over your own. No declarations, no confessions. Just two people who began to see each other more clearly in the spaces between words, and in those spaces, something important was quietly being built. The day her father came, I noticed before she told me, not because I saw him arrive, but because of the way she moved that morning. Quicker steps, tighter shoulders, a distracted kind of focus like she was rehearsing conversations in her head. She didn't open her window. That was the first sign. I passed her in the hallway hours later. She was dressed more carefully than usual, makeup applied with the kind of precision that didn't suit her. It didn't make her more beautiful, just less like herself. She nodded at me but didn't stop. The elevator closed between us. That evening I heard voices through the wall, not loud, just low and tense, the kind of voices that aren't meant to reach anyone else, but still carry weight. I didn't press my ear closer. I didn't want to know the words. Some things, once heard, don't leave quietly. An hour later, I found her sitting on the steps outside the building, arms wrapped around her knees. The cardigan she always wore hung loose, almost slipping off her shoulder. She wasn't crying, but her face looked washed out, like something had drained through her without asking permission. I sat beside her without speaking. She didn't look at me, didn't shift to make space, didn't flinch. That was enough of an invitation. We stayed like that for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't demand anything. Eventually, she said, "He says I make things harder for myself than they need to be." I didn't ask what she meant. She continued anyway. "He came to check if I'm settling in. That's code for asking if I'm dating again, if I'm doing something with my life besides breathing." I nodded slowly. "And are you?" She let out a dry laugh. "Some days, I think breathing is all I can manage." "That counts," I said. "Some days, that's more than enough." She turned to me, finally, and there was something sharp in her gaze, like she was daring me to look away. I didn't. "He always loved my ex," she said. "He thinks I walked away from something good, but he never saw the things I saw, never felt what it's like to disappear while someone still claims to love you." She didn't speak with bitterness, just tired honesty, like she'd carried the weight of those words too long, and they needed air. "I used to think I was the problem," she said quietly. "Still do sometimes." "You're not," I said. "Not as comfort, not as reassurance, just fact." She let the silence fill again, and this time it felt different, not empty, held. She leaned her head back against the wall, closed her eyes for a moment. "I don't know why I came out here. Because it's easier to breathe when no one's measuring how deep." Her eyes opened, softer now. "You're not what I expected. I'm not trying to be." That seemed to matter to her. She exhaled, long and slow, and for the first time that day, her shoulders relaxed. When she stood to go back inside, she paused. "Thanks for just sitting." "Any time." She walked away with steadier steps. I stayed behind for a while, letting the night settle around me. Something had shifted again, not loudly, but enough. The note was folded neatly and taped to my door, written in a slightly crooked script that I recognized immediately. I stood there a moment before peeling it off, as if it might change its message if I gave it time. It didn't. "If you go to the market today, would you mind letting me know? Julia." No signature, but she didn't need one. It was the first time she'd reached toward me without being pulled there by circumstance. I reread the note before slipping it into my pocket. I didn't answer with a reply note. I knocked. She opened the door like she'd expected me, not with surprise, but with that quiet readiness of someone who'd already considered the outcome. She leaned against the frame, barefoot, hair tied back carelessly. "I was about to go," I said. "Good timing," she replied. We didn't talk much on the way. We walked side by side, not quite touching, each carrying our own silence like a well-worn coat. The street was busy in the way weekends always are. People rushing toward errands, not meaning to be seen. But with her beside me, the noise dulled, like the world moved one step further away. At the market, we drifted between aisles. She moved without hesitation, choosing things quickly, but always pausing to look back. She asked which apples I liked. I pointed. She took 2 of each. When we passed the tea section, she ran her fingers along the boxes without choosing one. I grabbed the same one I'd served her weeks ago and dropped it into her basket. She noticed, but said nothing. Her smile said enough. At checkout, she reached for her wallet. I shook my head gently. "I've got it. You don't have to." "I know." That was all. She let me. On the way back, she talked more. Not about anything heavy, just fragments. Stories about her mother's cooking, how she used to love rain but now hated wet socks, how she once adopted a stray cat that only stayed for a day. Her voice softened as she spoke, like language was becoming easier to trust again. When we got back to the building, she didn't retreat immediately. We stood by the steps, bags at our feet, the late light stretching across the pavement. "Thank you," she said, looking at me with something steady in her eyes, "for letting this be simple." "Not everything needs to be complicated," I said, "but most things are. Then, maybe we let this be the exception." She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. That felt like agreement. I carried her bag to her door without asking. She unlocked it, pushed it open with her foot, and turned back to me. "You're easy to stand next to. That was all she said before stepping inside. The door closed softly. I went back to my place and set the groceries down. The note was still in my pocket. I unfolded it again, even though I knew every word. It wasn't what she said that mattered. It was that she'd written to me at all, that she'd reached. And in that quiet gesture, I felt something shift, not in the air, not in her, but in me. A recognition. Our choice being made slowly, without a name yet, but with weight. The notice went up on the lobby board one Tuesday afternoon, handwritten in thick marker, surrounded by uneven doodles of balloons and poorly drawn wine glasses. Someone upstairs was organizing a casual get-together for the tenants. A building party, it said, like that meant something cheerful. Easy, normal. I read it on my way out to get the mail. Julia was already standing there, arms crossed, reading it too. "Are you going?" she asked, not looking at me. "I wasn't planning on it," I replied. She nodded slowly. "Me neither." I left it at that. We parted ways without further comment, but when Saturday came, I found myself standing by the door longer than necessary. I could hear voices down the hall, laughter, the muffled rhythm of a playlist someone had tried too hard to curate. I almost stayed in. I almost didn't knock on her door, but I did. She opened it wearing a black sweater, hair down, eyes searching mine for an answer I didn't offer aloud. She hesitated for less than a second before reaching for her keys. We walked down together. No conversation between us, only the shared weight of going somewhere we'd both said we wouldn't. The apartment was crowded enough to make it feel smaller than it was. People stood in clusters, smiling too wide, holding drinks like shields. I didn't know most of them. Julia knew even fewer. We found a corner by the balcony door, a spot away from the music, the noise, the flood of small talk. She leaned against the wall, sipped a glass of something red, and whispered, "This was a mistake." "No one's making us stay," I said. "I know, but maybe I wanted to see if I could do normal again." "This isn't normal," I said. "Dave's curated chaos." She smiled. "That sounds like something you'd say. Is that good or bad?" She shrugged. "I haven't decided." A neighbor tried to pull her into conversation, a man in a button-down shirt too tight at the shoulders, asking where she was from, what she did, why she lived here. She answered politely, then drifted back toward me as soon as the exchange ended. "You're like a lighthouse," she murmured. I raised an eyebrow. "Safe to stand next to." "Easy to find when the water gets loud." I didn't respond, just held her gaze a moment longer than usual. She looked away first, but not before something in her eyes softened. Later, when the crowd thinned and the music got quieter, we stepped out onto the balcony. The air was cool, the city distant and small from where we stood. "I don't know how to be around people anymore," she said. "You're doing fine. I only feel fine when I'm near you." The words weren't wrapped in romance. They were plain, unguarded, like she wasn't asking anything of me, just telling the truth. "I feel steadier when you're close," I admitted. Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "I don't want to lean on someone again and lose my balance when they move." "Then don't lean," I said. "Just walk beside." She nodded, almost imperceptibly. We didn't stay much longer. On the way back, our hands brushed. She didn't pull away, I didn't look down. The contact was brief, but it carried more than the entire evening had offered. At her door, she paused. "Thank you for going," she said. "Even if it wasn't your thing." It was quiet enough where we stood. She smiled, unlocked her door, and stepped inside. That night, I left my window open just a little longer. So did she. Neither of us looked out, but we didn't have to. The storm came without warning, not the kind that rumbles in from a distance, giving you time to close windows and brace yourself. It arrived sudden and sharp, the sky splitting open as if something heavy had finally given way. The power flickered once, then failed completely. Everything fell into silence. No hum from the refrigerator, no dull glow from the hallway light, just the sound of rain hammering the world flat. I lit a candle. Not for light I could manage in the dark, but for presence. A small flame to remind me the room was still mine. I sat on the floor, leaned against the couch, and listened. Then, the knock, soft, uncertain, but unmistakable. I opened the door, and there she was, hair damp, a hoodie pulled halfway over her head. She looked smaller in the dim light, not afraid, but fragile in a way that asked not to be noticed too quickly. "Do you have light?" she asked, already stepping in. I closed the door behind her. She sat without waiting for an invitation, curling up on the far end of the couch. Her fingers twisted the drawstrings of her hoodie like she was untying a thought she couldn't quite reach. "I hate the dark when it's loud," she said. "It makes everything inside louder, too." I knew what she meant. She stared at the candle for a long time, then whispered, "When I was little, I used to think if I stayed very still during storms, they wouldn't notice me, like I could hide from the sky." I didn't answer. Some memories aren't meant to be comforted. They just need a place to land. "I'm tired," she said suddenly, "not just tonight, all the time, of pretending I know what I'm doing, of feeling like I'm always one step behind whatever life expects of me." Her voice didn't break, but it wavered, thin and uncertain. "I don't tell people that," she added. "I'm not sure why I'm telling you. Maybe because I won't try to fix it." Her eyes met mine. Exactly. The storm cracked again outside. She flinched, barely, then laughed at herself. "I'm ridiculous. You're human. That's not the same thing." It should be. Silence again. Not empty. Waited. Then, softer. "I've been left before. Not in the dramatic way, just gradually. People pulling back until I couldn't reach them anymore, until I stopped trying." Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "So I learned not to need anyone." I waited before speaking. Then, gently, "That's a hard way to live. It's safer." "Is it?" She didn't answer. The candle flickered low. I moved to replace it. She watched me, eyes following every quiet gesture like they mattered more than they should. When I sat back down, closer this time, she didn't shift away. "I keep expecting you to want something," she said. "But you just stay." "I don't need anything from you," I replied. "But I like when you're here." She exhaled, slow, a kind of surrender, but not the weak kind, the kind that comes after holding something too long. "I don't know what this is," she whispered. "Neither do I," said, "but it doesn't feel wrong." Her hand rested on the cushion between us, fingers curled lightly inward. I didn't reach for it. I just stayed close enough that if she wanted to, she could. We sat like that until the storm passed, not waiting for it to end, just being there while it happened. Together, there was no ceremony to it. One morning, I moved the armchair in my living room from its usual place by the window to the far corner, where the light didn't quite reach. It wasn't about rearranging furniture. It was about not needing the view anymore, not watching the space across from me for signs of her, not waiting. I still opened the blinds. I still let the air in. But the chair no longer faced her window. It faced inward. Later that week, I passed her in the hallway. She was carrying a bag of books, slightly off balance, struggling to keep it from tearing. I offered to help. She didn't argue. Inside her apartment, the air smelled faintly of orange peel and something herbal. Her space felt different from mine, softer, less deliberate, like she'd made a home by simply being in it, not designing it. She set the bag down and said, "You moved your chair." I paused. "You noticed?" She nodded. "I liked that you sat there. It felt like I was always waiting," I said. "Were you?" I didn't answer. Not directly. She didn't press. She made tea. No candle this time, just the quiet clinking of cups and the kettle's slow breath. We sat on her couch, knees not touching but close enough to sense warmth. She glanced at me now and then, as if trying to read something in my posture. "I don't want to be something you orbit," she said softly. "Something you watch but never reach." "You're not," I said. "That's why I moved the chair." Her expression didn't change, but her breathing did. Shallower at first, then steadier. "I used to think if I stayed still enough, people would stay," she murmured. "But I kept being left, even when I made myself small. You don't need to be small with me. I don't know how else to be." We didn't speak for a while. The tea cooled in our hands. Outside, the street moved on, uncaring and unaware. Eventually, she asked, "Are you waiting for something to change?" "No," I said. "I just want to be where you are." That wasn't a confession. It was a location. Her fingers twitched against the side of her mug. She didn't look at me when she said, I think I've been waiting for someone to choose me without making a scene. I nodded. Then let this be quiet. Her eyes met mine. I'm afraid I'll need more than quiet someday. Then I'll speak, I said, but not to convince you, just to stand where you can see me. She didn't smile, but something settled in her shoulders, like a tension she hadn't named, was finally stepping back. I helped her shelve the books. We didn't talk about titles, we didn't talk about us, but every time she handed me one, our fingers brushed. Not on purpose, not entirely by accident. When I left, she walked me to the door. Your window's still across from mine, she said. I know. She leaned her head slightly to the side. Even without the chair, I still see you. That night, I didn't look out, but I knew her window was open. I didn't need to see it to be sure. She told me on a Wednesday, the kind of day no one remembers later, the kind where things happen not because they're meant to, but because time doesn't stop long enough to be consulted. I got an offer, she said. A position in another city. Something more stable. Better pay. It's not official yet, but it's real. I listened, not just to her words, but to the breath between them, the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, the way her fingers stayed clenched in the hem of her sleeve, like she was holding onto something smaller than fear, but bigger than doubt. That's good, I said. She didn't respond right away, just stared at the floor, then looked up, like she was waiting for me to pull something out of her hands. I don't know if I want to go, she admitted. You don't have to decide now. But if I do go, she said, I need to know it's because I chose to, not because I was running from something or someone. Then choose. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That's not an answer. It's the only one that's mine to give. She sat down heavily on the edge of the coffee table, knees close together, hands now loose in her lap. You're not going to ask me to stay. No? Why not? Because if you stayed for me, it wouldn't be your choice. A long silence followed. I let it. I keep waiting for the part where you try to convince me, she said. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here if you stay. And I'll be here if you don't. Her voice cracked then, just slightly. That sounds too kind to be true. It's not kindness. It's clarity. She stood up, paced once across the room, then turned back. I'm scared of choosing wrong. I've done that before. There's no right or wrong in this, just real or not. And you, she asked, would you wait? I'm not waiting, I said. I'm living. You're part of that, right now. If that changes, I'll keep living. But don't mistake that for indifference. Her eyes searched mine. So you do care. I care enough not to make this about me. She sat down again, this time closer, knees brushing mine. You make it very hard to walk away. That's not my intention. But it's the result. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She stayed a while longer. We didn't speak of the offer again that night. She didn't say whether she was leaning one way or the other. But when she left, she lingered at the door, hand on the frame. If I stay, she said, will that be enough for you? I don't need a promise, I said. Just presence. She nodded. It wasn't agreement. Not yet. But it wasn't goodbye either. After she left, I stood in the quiet and felt something heavy lift, not because I had what I wanted, but because I'd let it rest where it belonged. With her, choice is the opposite of pressure, and I'd given her that. Not as a strategy, not as a test, but because anything less would have been false. It was a quiet return, not marked by suitcases or dramatic entrances. One morning, her window was open again, curtain drawn to the side like it used to be, not halfway, not tentative, open. The armchair stayed in the corner, but I noticed it anyway. Not because I was looking for it, but because I wasn't, and it still found me. Later that week, I came home to find my door slightly ajar. Not broken, not forced, just unlatched. I stepped inside and there she was, sitting on my couch, a book in her lap she hadn't started reading. She looked up like I was late, though we'd never made plans. I figured if I knocked, you might answer like a neighbor, she said. And I wanted something more than that today. I didn't ask when she made her decision. I didn't ask if she'd turned down the job or if it had slipped away on its own. I didn't ask anything at all. I just sat down beside her. I told my father I wasn't going, she said. He didn't understand. He asked what was keeping me here. And what did you say? I said nothing was keeping me. I just wanted to stay. That mattered to me, more than I let show. She glanced around the room, taking in the shifted chair, the warm cup left cooling on the table, the quiet hum of something unspoken but constant. "You don't decorate much," she said. "I try not to get too comfortable in what might change." Her voice was low. "Then why did you let me in?" "Because some things change us instead." She leaned back, closed her eyes for a second. "Do you think this is permanent?" "No," I said, "but I think it's real." She opened her eyes. "That's enough. It has to be." The book sat unopened between us. We didn't pretend to read. We didn't pretend to need to. She reached for the mug on the table, took a small sip, made a face. "Cold. You came late. You left the door open." We traded small truths like currency, knowing the value wasn't in the weight but the willingness. She stayed through sunset. The light changed in the room slowly, naturally. No one mentioned turning on a lamp. The dim suited us. At some point, she stood, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain fully open. I watched her silhouette against the soft evening, and for a moment the world paused. Then she turned back and said, "I don't want to keep checking if you're still here." "You don't have to," she nodded. "I know. We didn't make promises. We didn't need to. She didn't leave that night. I didn't ask her to stay. The door never closed again. Not entirely. Not between us. And when morning came, the curtains stayed open. The light stayed steady. The silence stayed full. We were no longer waiting. We were simply there.